So we're talking about City Winery right now and their decision to email all of their patrons and tell them that going forward, there's going to be a $25 minimum on food and beverage sales when coming to their concerts at any of their venues. Let me just say that I don't know anything about City Winery's business or their business model or how they're doing, or I'm not affiliated with them or anyone else when it comes to City Winery and how they do their business. But I just have a couple thoughts on this that I mentioned in my newsletter this past Sunday, and it's interesting to see what happens to venues when things like that are implemented. And they're not all negative, but I have a couple of different opinions about whether this is okay or not, and maybe some scenarios that we might not be thinking of. Usually when you think a price minimum on food and beverage, you think dress code, some kind of establishment like that uses it as a way to get a certain clientele and to just keep the establishment elevated. When I was at Berkeley, a few friends of mine went to the Top of the Hub to go see a jazz quartet, and there was a 2-drink minimum. I think it was either a 2-drink minimum or a $25 minimum, something like that. But each drink was like $20 or something like that. So when you're in college and you have a $20 drink and it's a 2-drink minimum, $40 to a college student, it's a pretty sizable chunk of the weekly budget. So when you go in already having spent money on tickets, say it's you and your significant other or a friend or a couple of friends, and you have this group, it can get pretty pricey and pretty expensive. So especially when the scenario in which this was brought up to me, if a family comes in that brings their whole family, 3 kids, 2 adults, maybe they bring friends or something like that, there shouldn't be some kind of financial barrier to entry for people who just want to come with their family and enjoy a show because it's seated. It's comfortable. Maybe the volume of the show is more reasonable than a stand-up show or something of that nature. So you hear that there's going to be a $25 minimum food spend, which could even be a low budget, but who knows? Let's explore some of those reasons why they might do that. First, let's just read the email from the CEO from City Winery just to see their reason in black and white. Dear City Winery fans, City Winery stands proudly as one of the last few truly independent venues dedicated to offering an intimate and immersive live entertainment experience. Our commitment is to exceptional sound, lighting, sightlines, and pairing world-class performances with incredible food and drink. Incredible is a stretch, and I'm sorry, City Winery. It is. It just is. The menu's been the same for a long time, and I don't mean to talk crap, but let's just call it what it is. It's not an upscale dining experience. Let's just say that. It's just not, because there's a lot of different things. They're primarily a music venue. You are not going to a City Winery just for dinner. You don't say, hey, I want dinner. What do you want tonight? You want to go to City Winery and not buy a ticket to a show and not sit down and see a whole show and just have dinner? That doesn't really happen. We are writing to share an important update. Starting with this week, newly announced shows and all future shows that go on sale, there will be a $25 minimum spend on food and beverage per person for all events. This new policy is essential to sustaining your experience, which prioritizes giving the majority of ticket sales directly to the talented artists who grace our stage. While we encourage you to spend that or more for our shows that you have tickets or were already on sale, the minimum will not be enforced. Sorry, that's a little bit of a word salad there. Your support helps us continue to attract world-class performers while ensuring that we remain an independent hub for live entertainment and community connection. Thank you for helping us preserve and grow this special space for independent artistry. To that end, our culinary team has crafted an exciting menu designed to pair beautifully with our award-winning wines. We're confident you'll enjoy these new offerings and leave inspired to return to indulge your senses. For more information, please visit our FAQs page. Warm regards, Michael Dorf, founder and CEO, City Winery. So there's a couple of interesting things there. I'll kind of start from the end and work my way up to the top. It seems like they have a new menu, and maybe they do want to, or they're going to be implementing a new menu, and maybe they do want to expand and become a little bit more food conscious and up the bar with their food, which has been, I'll admit it, it's been a little stale for the last couple of years. It just hasn't really changed much. I'm eating off the band menu most of the time, which is a smaller version of the regular menu, but still, it's always fine. It's always good. Never had any problems, never felt sick afterwards. It's always good quality food. But like I said, it's not a fine dining experience. I can have wine at my kitchen table and it's not a fine dining experience. And nowadays, everything is getting more expensive. So if you're planning on implementing a new menu, those prices are most likely going to go up, which would maybe create a scenario where you wouldn't have to raise the minimum price to $25 per head because you're already anticipating that the menu is going to work, the price is going to be higher, you're going to have more revenue, and you kind of extend that margin a little bit. The main issue here, what they say is the main reason they're doing this is to give the ticket prices, the majority of the ticket prices, to the artists. So what does that mean? If they're getting the majority of the ticket prices, or if they want to give the artists the majority of the ticket prices, that means that they are having trouble booking higher quality talent because they can't make any better deals. The deal can only get so good for ticket prices to give to the artist because either the artist is not selling out the venue, they're not selling out enough tickets, or there's just unpredictability. They don't know if they're going to have that kind of experience. So people might, if every seat isn't filled, you're not getting revenue, food and beverage revenue from those seats, which means they have to take from the artist pay, from the ticket price, to be able to pay their rent or pay their employees or whatever they have to pay for. I don't know their numbers. So that brings up another interesting question is what kind of artists play places like City Winery? What kind of talent is going to command a price, or what kind of talent is going to guarantee that all the seats in the venue are filled? Because there's also the issue of drop counted tickets. And a drop counted ticket is when someone buys a ticket to a show and doesn't show up for the show. I don't know if that's been as big of a problem for city wineries or seated venues like this, but I know it's been an issue for standing room only venues. Maybe someone wants to buy a ticket to support the artist and they just decide not to come, or maybe something comes up. I think there was an issue with the show that I played recently where there was a high drop count. A lot of people that bought tickets, but they didn't show up. So they have the numbers at the end of the night. They're like, this doesn't add up. That hurts venues. Reason being, the people don't show up to spend money in their venues. The bands don't get any aspect of that money. They don't see how much they made at the bar. They don't see how much they made for food or whatever. They don't get reports or write-ups of that, or at least that is my understanding of it. So venues like this, like City Winery, have to rely extremely heavily on the talent that they bring in. So if making their price per person brings that revenue up, which seems like a low number to me for whatever reason, but if they have to bring that number up to 25 per person to be able to afford a higher quality talent that guarantees that the seats are going to be filled, and then they have a guaranteed 25 per person for X amount of seats that they have in their venues, they have a more predictable year. They have a more predictable fiscal situation where they don't have to guess and figure out if this is going to sell tickets because they're getting people that they know are going to sell tickets. One example that I brought up in my newsletter, which was largely affected by the pandemic, and again, you don't realize how razor thin the margins of these places are. they're really difficult to sustain. And you walk in and they really are just doing the bare bones to keep the doors open and keep everybody paid, keep everybody happy. A lot of these places are passion projects to have music in the community. Maybe it's something they always wanted to do and have a venue and have that experience. And they're great for communities. They really, really are. The arts and all that. It's obvious. I mean, that's why we're doing this. But these places have to make money to survive. And I'm not trying to make the point that I think it's right that they have this limit. I just think that the transparency and what's involved is important for concert goers and people that want to go and have an experience. Because who's to say that the city winery experience is even the best one for a particular artist or band? It's not always the best case scenario. Sometimes the set list has to be rethought, maybe play things that are quieter or less, not lesser versions, but just different versions. And maybe the audience isn't into that and they'd rather have the regular experience. Now, one example is Rockwood Music Hall, which is a venue on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, was a venue on the Lower East Side of Manhattan that I would go to and play at all the time. They have stage 1, which is a small place, has a bar in it, and was beautiful, amazing. The drum set's on the floor, like in the audience practically, and it's a really raw sounding room, very vibey, very cool. And that was their original space. Then they expanded over to Rockwood Stage 2, which is directly next door. It was a bigger room. It's standing room only. There's a little balcony, like really famous people would drop in and play there. But the way it works is, I think they open maybe at 6 p.m. and they go until 1 in the morning or 2 in the morning, whatever it is. And there's a band every hour. So you come in, you set up, you play your set, your audience files in, you play your set, and then after that, everyone leaves, you included, as the band. You have to get your shit off the stage as fast as possible. Super fast changeover. You have to use all the backline stuff just to make it work, make it make any kind of sense. So some bands can't even do stuff like that. The other key factor is there was never a door charge. It was always free. You could always drop in and go see a show, 10 shows, 20 shows for free. But they had waitresses come around for a 2-drink minimum, but it wasn't always super enforced. Like I could find ways to get around not paying for a drink. They would always give the bands drink tickets and stuff like that, which is great. But that's the business model. There's no food, so you're relying on the bar, and that is a lot of drinks in a certain amount of time. And I guess it's a volume thing. How many bands come in, they can kind of cut their losses and not have to worry about it, because on average, however many people come in, there's a lot of new people and it's a vibey place. So people want to be there. They'll buy drinks. Your drinks are, more or less pretty expensive. It's New York. So that was the business model. But then they started having ticketed shows. You could play a ticketed show at Rockwood, but you had to be able to fill it up pretty much. They're not going to have a ticketed show lose having bodies in the room to be able to buy drinks for that 2-drink minimum. So you had to be able to sell tickets. It was a thing. You had to be a more or less established act. But they were getting really cool people from New York, like Sarah Bareilles would pop in. Brandi Carlile did a recorded event at Rockwood Stage 2, and it's a very small room, and it's very, very cool. But they're gone now. They originally cut back Stage 2, and I even forgot to mention that they bought the property behind Stage 2, which turned into this big open bar where they would host events, which I think was another aspect of their business model. But in the basement of that bar was Rockwood Stage 3, which was this super vibey listening room that only had a piano in it, very limited seating, and I believe all of those shows were ticketed. Like you had to pay, you had to be some kind of established act to play Stage 3 and have a ticketed show. Very limited seating. So you had an aspect of exclusivity that came with that venue. But over the course of the pandemic, whether it was mismanagement, whether it was just the vibe of the city changed, or the fact that the pandemic, people didn't want to be in that close proximity with each other, and New York really struggled a lot with that situation. They took away or sold those other parts of the business and went back to Rockwood Stage 1. And I believe within a few months, November 10th was their last day that they were open, and it just went away. They just sent an email to the performers, said, hey, we're done. Doors are closed. They never even had an official announcement. They just kind of went away quietly, which is a very sad thing, especially for musicians that have ever played Rockwood. It was an amazing place. It was beautiful. It sounded great. It was vibey. And most people looked forward to being there and playing that show. I think it draws a parallel to City Winery doing this, because it just shows you that maybe their business model has worked up to this point, but they expanded so fast. Maybe it's just not working in every situation or maybe every market. They need to have higher quality talent to be able to grow their business anymore. And the way that they get that is to give them a higher percentage of the ticket sales. So there's this balancing act that happens. They need to be able to make money on food and beverage to pay their staff, to pay the rent, to pay whatever, all their overhead. They have to take care of that with the food and beverage. So they have to guarantee that if they're going to give someone a higher percentage of the ticket, that person who is selling the tickets, the band, the artist, whatever, has to be able to fill the seats. They have to guarantee that they're going to get a really high percentage of sales of the capacity or sellouts. Now, the people that suffer in this situation, because most people, if you go as a couple, $25, if you're going to have one drink and a meal, you're going to spend $25, no problem. But if you have a large family and maybe you plan on having dinner at home and going out to see the show because maybe this is the only time they're playing in your city this year, then it's a real bummer if your night out with your kids and a group of people becomes a financial burden. It's not great. And I would find it very hard to believe that the current bands that play places like City Winery, what I call the working man's bands, are out there. Like, they care. They want the people that want to come to the show to be able to be at the show. You know, they can't afford to not have people sit this one out because they might not be there the next time. And bands and booking agents and venues and talent buyers are always looking at the numbers, and it doesn't really necessarily matter why someone didn't show up. It just matters that, oh, wait, you did this last time, you did this time, these numbers, why did that happen? And that affects the negotiation of your deals. So what is a scenario where everyone can win? I would have to ask if that policy would apply to children. Like, you don't expect a child to order something off of the kids menu. Maybe it's a $10 chicken fingers and then have to make up the $15 extra when they don't necessarily want anything. You know, it doesn't seem all that fair. And if someone is not of age to have alcohol, I don't believe they should be required to meet that $25 minimum. And I think that would make it a lot fairer for families that want to take their kids and whole family to a show to be able to still continue to do so and not really spend more than they would have in the past. Because let's not forget, there's also the balance between merchandise and food and beverage. So you have this whole other thing where if someone would come out to a show and they spent money on their ticket and they're standing, they're playing, there's drinks being sold, there's a bar open, but there's no food. So maybe that money will go towards the merchandise. And are they taking a cut of the merchandise? So we have to ask ourselves that question too. I don't know if City Winery takes a cut of merchandise, but you guys know how I feel about that. I think it's not okay. And especially an establishment that claims a robust dining experience surely wouldn't need to take a percentage of a traveling working band's merchandise sales. What kinds of artists are going to sell out city wineries? I think the perfect scenario for a city winery, which isn't full band loud show. In the newsletter, I use an extreme example like the band Slayer or someone like Slayer. You're not going to have heavy metal acts come in and play at a place like City Winery. It's just not going to happen. And if it has happened, whoever booked the show should be fired. The perfect scenario for them is having like a frontman from a bigger band that wants to come out and maybe do some of their solo work or whatever. They can sell their name, they can sell their band's name, and people are going to want to come out to see them. OAR's Mark Roberge does it, and he's had other artists come and join him and have it be this cool songwriter interaction with the audience, and which I also think is important with city wineries in particular. I think interaction with the audience, because you're having a meal. It's like you're hanging out together. So that is the special thing about a place like City Winery. And if you get people that are of that caliber, Taylor Goldsmith from Dawes is another example. I believe he's going on a tour with another artist and they're doing a duo thing and they're playing small venues, which are definitely going to sell out because people want to see those people in the small environment because you don't get to hang out with them. You don't get to interact with them really at a big show. It just doesn't make any sense. So a city winery is a perfect scenario for that kind of artist. If they're going to be able to afford that artist, which has other options, which could play at a much different venue, you have to be able to give them a good deal on ticket prices. You're going to elevate your ticket price, and then you're also going to have to give them the majority of it because they're probably going to sell out the venue. And then also you're going to have a $25 food and beverage minimum. From a business standpoint, it's a good idea because those people are going to come and probably spend that money anyway. But the situation and the vibe and the scenario has to be right. It has to be its own personal experience to be able to sell that to fans. I may have already said this, but fans might not want to sit down and have that experience with a particular band. They might want to have the regular stand-up experience. You have to factor that into your booking for it to make sense. I am in most scenarios on the side of the artist, but when a venue, an independent venue like this, introduces a policy, that's an indication of a problem. And I think the problem is the expectation of the experience that the concert goer is going to get. And the particular talent and artists that go in there is not creating the perfect scenario and the perfect balance for happy bands, happy artists, happy patrons, happy guests, happy fans, and then a happy establishment that is thriving and flourishing and able to continue to make the experience for their guests and for the music fans better and better and better. It's never a great look when someone implements a policy like this. It doesn't look great. Maybe it'll work. Maybe it will. And I don't know, but I think a lot of this falls on booking. I know many of the city wineries have private events, so maybe they need to expand their private events and maybe concerts don't become their primary source of income and business model. A lot of them are super beautiful and you can have a wedding there, you can have a reception there, you can have a party there. Like they're really great places. But I see a city winery as a perfect spot for a singer-songwriter, a 2 or 3 musician type deal where the audience wants to connect with a particular artist. I see it as a great potential comedy place. I know that they've had comedians in the past, and I know they do it in New York or whatever. I'm sure they do it all the time, but comedy's huge. That should be a focus. It's one person on stage, one microphone, super low overhead. You fill the room. People are drinking. They want to have a good time. They want to converse. They want to laugh. They want to be a part of it. That's a great experience. But with so many different markets, I imagine there's a difference in opinion of what works. They introduced brunches. They had bands come in during the day on brunches. It's a bit of a balancing act, but I like City Winery. I want City Winery to stick around. I just think that they maybe have lost their vision a little bit, and they don't have quite the perfect business model that helps everyone involved. I thought I was done here. I ran out to do some errands and stuff around the house, and it kind of hit me that another factor is that they're having issues with their help, their servers. It's been so hard everywhere to find decent service in a place. A teenager or a 20-something-year-old that isn't distracted, that doesn't go to the back and you're looking around like, hey, where's my server every 2 seconds? Attentive people that upsell, that, make you have a better time. A great server goes a really long way to making policies like this not have to be implemented. Because if you have great servers that are on board with a certain script, a certain thing that they can upsell, a certain way to get the patrons to maybe get another round and do that kind of thing. That's how restaurants did well in the past. Now they're trying to just say, hey, you're going to spend $25 whether you like it or not, no matter how good your server is, because we need to make sure that these servers make X amount of money in tips so we can afford better help. The good restaurants have fantastic service. They let you have a great experience. And that, on top of seeing your favorite band, is like it blows your mind. It's just such great potential that City Winery has. And I think the pandemic and all this stuff has really hurt a lot of the service industry and the quality of the service in certain places, because they're not making money. There's other options. There's whatever. People don't want to take people's bullshit. So it's harder to find good service for that tier and that level of an establishment. So I was walking around and I was like, you know what? That could be a factor too, of maybe they have to bring that up to a certain level to have a better quality service. My wife works in the hotel industry, and her hotel isn't necessarily in the city anymore. And even a couple of miles down the road will affect what the hourly wage of an employee is at a hotel. So you can't pay someone the same amount that they would make in Back Bay, Boston, as you would out in, Dorchester even, or maybe out in Wellesley. So it's just a little bit of that kind of factor. Where is the City Winery located in the city? What is the quality of life? What are the living expenses? Like, what kind of help can you afford in that particular area? And it's all different all around the country. So it's another thing to think about. I don't know if it's necessarily true, but it just popped into my head. And now I'm going to get back to my original recording, which is wrapping up right now. That's how I feel about it. Let me know how you feel in the comments. Make sure you subscribe, and subscribe to that newsletter. It's free. I hope you all have a wonderful week, and I'll see you soon.